Hey there, everyone. It is Camber here with The Great Retention. I am your host and young professional expert. This podcast is sponsored by the YoProKnow, a consulting group that helps companies recruit and retain their young professional talent. This is a little bit of an unusual show. As you can tell, I am not in the studio, and we are bringing you an updated podcast. We had a really wonderful host for our 5th episode of the season. And unfortunately, she actually just switched jobs, and we didn't want to play her interview, mostly because she is with a new company now and she's rocking it and doing wonderful things. But it was such an important topic that we felt like we had to bring you this updated version. And it's all about how to recruit Gen Z the smart way. Now you probably know why I think it's so important, and this is why we're bringing you this update from my home office. I hope you like it, enjoy. It's going to be a brief update on the actual podcast content. I just looked through it earlier and wanted to bring you some of the hard-hitting topics that are really impertinent to your work today as business leaders as you're trying to hire and source the best talent that is of the Gen Z generation as they're rising in the workforce. So we're going to get into it. The first part of this podcast, we really just talked about the current trends that we're seeing in recruiting as a whole. Trends such as most job seekers, most young professionals are actually not even looking for jobs. You definitely have the half that are, but over 50% of the workforce is actually not looking for a position, yet they end up taking new positions because recruiters came after them. And that's from Gallup, or most recent study that they came out with this summer. So when you see that we have these recruiters coming at all angles, right? Plus disengagement at work, that's why you're seeing so much job hopping from these young professional professions. And now another trend that we talked about was, of course, social media, right? We know that social media plays a significant role when hiring and recruiting Gen Z. So what are you doing as companies right now to attract and source young professionals through your social media? That's one thing that I always look for when I first start working with a company. I will immediately go to their social media page. And a lot of you are probably wondering, why do you do that, Camber? You should look at our website, look at our career page. That's where we get all of our sourcing. And the reality is Gen Z is, primarily all of them are on social media. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram Reels. Video content is in a new form, right? We have seen the form of video just skyrocket really since the pandemic. That's when we've really started to see TikTok explode and Instagram Reels for that matter. And this interviewee that I had for this podcast, she is a recruiter and was a recruiter, and her main message for us was, if you're not adapting to video content right now and using that for your career engagement, you are really missing out and you're going to be behind. So one of my favorite podcast episodes ever, we have not released this yet, so you'll see this in a couple of weeks, but he talked about how, YouTube several years ago, 10 plus years ago, businesses were scared to get involved in that. And now look at YouTube. Everybody is on YouTube because it's video content. So if your business is coming to me and saying, well, we're not really the type of business that should be on TikTok. The interviewee that I talked to for this podcast episode in particular, she said, as a recruiter, you have to walk this fine line and find this good balance between being professional and credible and then meeting your candidates where they are at. So that being said, we know that Gen Z is on social media, and so we know they're on YouTube. If you're not on there, are you willing to risk losing out on strong candidates when all your competitors and peers could be on social media? So we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about just how generations are kind of really different in the workplace and how you should recruit them and source them. This specific interview, both of us are from the millennial generation. And we talked a lot about how we're in this kind of weird in-between place where, we have similar traits as some of our predecessors in Gen X and baby boomers. Millennials are hardworking despite what some people might think, but we're also very similar to our Gen Z counterparts, where we are influenced easily by everything because we did grow up in the digital world. We were the first digital natives. And we really are influenced very easily. And so we're influenced by some of these common trends that is really important for you to take note of. People laugh now because work-life balance is so often mentioned. I saw a video that was sent to me the other day, basically making fun of a millennial taking a mental health day. And while it was a satirical clip, it really was. I know that no harm done. I was not offended, but millennials are easily influenced, and we've grown up in an age, and Gen Z is the same way. We grew up in an age where it is accepted to take a mental health day because companies should care about how we feel emotionally because we're bringing our whole selves to work. And so that was one of my favorite pieces from this interview in particular with the recruiter was companies are more and more good companies, I should say, are treating their employees more and more as the whole person rather than someone who is only there to produce, which is what a lot of our Gen X and baby boomer counterparts have experienced. And even some of the millennials, the millennials in their 30s, they didn't experience that. But somebody that's my age, in their late 20s, one of the younger millennials, and definitely all of the young professionals after me in the Gen Z generation, they are experiencing something where an employer that's really good and a strong employer is going to treat you as a whole person. They're going to understand that if you have a doctor appointment at 4:00, you can go, but know that you're going to get the work done that afternoon. So all of that to say, we could talk all about generations for an entire podcast episode, and that might be coming next season. So stay tuned. But it's really important to mention here that you have to understand where these generations are. Trends like flexibility and work-life balance, growth and earning potential is something that Gen Z really cares about. And if you can convey those messages through social media, and by social media, LinkedIn is always great, but not as many Gen Zers are on LinkedIn. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram. They're really not on Facebook as much, but you can find them and meet them where they're at by conveying these messages that are so important to them. So tangible tips that you can take with you after listening to this podcast episode. 1, assess your social media strategy. If you feel that your social media strategy is well connected with HR and recruiting, then check, you are good to go. If you're not, there are plenty of resources out there. More and more resources are starting to come up with this topic. I'm happy to help you myself with the Yo Pro No, and reach out to some recruiters that you know to kind of get a feel and maybe educate yourselves better on what the right path is for your company. Not everything is going to work for your company, but you never know unless you try, and testing things out is really important. I do have to mention that just, any companies that are out there thinking of TikTok and thinking only of dancing, that is not the case. I know some CEOs that I meet with, and I have to tell them, promise you do not have to get out there and dance. But this is a way to educate people on what a day in the life is like. I have had young professionals that I've interviewed tell me that, especially specifically Gen Zers, they choose companies. They're not even going to your website anymore. I hate to break it to you. They will go there eventually, but a lot of companies will be, their first impression will actually be through their social media. And so I had a young professional specifically tell me recently that when she looked up the company, which was going to their Instagram page first, she noticed that there were a lot of recognition posts. That was a great retention tool, but it's also a great recruiting tool because you're retaining the people in the office already by engaging with them through social media, recognizing them for passing a certification or, being a great leader, whatever that looks like. They were doing something really good on their recruiting front too, because this young professional said, wow, that's really great. That shows that they really care about their employees. Another young professional that I spoke to recently has, looked at somebody's page and they saw that they had golf tournaments, and they went to, they sponsored several community service organizations and participated in golf tournaments. And so for this guy, he really liked that because he enjoys golf and he enjoys the outdoors, and he thought that meant they were really engaged in the community. So all of that to say, know who your audience is, know what Gen Z wants, take some of the keywords that we've talked about today, really assess your recruiting goals and your strategies, and see if you can apply some of these tips today. So To wrap things up, again, I'm sorry that we could not film or show you the episode that was filmed in the studio originally. I hope you enjoyed the Yoprono's home desk edition of The Great Retention with Camber Parker. As I always mention at the end of every episode, there will be majority young professionals in the workforce between millennials and Gen Zers by 2030. And so with the growing number of baby boomers that are exiting the workforce every day, really at a rapid pace since the beginning of the pandemic, there will not be enough leaders to fill those spots that are being left behind right now. And so it is our challenge as a business community and as a workforce to make sure that our young professional leaders are set up for success. That is our mission here at the Yoprono. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with our next episode.